In this edition of Careers That Matter, I'm joined by Murray Leith, the Chief Investment Officer at Odlum Brown. Murray, welcome.
Thank you.
What exactly is a Chief Investment Officer?
Well, in my role at Odlum Brown, I manage a research team that picks stocks that ultimately get used in client portfolios. And I'm the firm's chief strategist. I think about where the world's going, what the risks are, how we should be diversifying portfolios, and probably the most important thing that I can do in that role is hold hands when there's turbulence, because the average investor doesn't achieve the returns that the stock market overall does, and it's because they're emotional. They buy too much when things are up and everybody's excited and the future looks wonderful, and then they tend to panic when the headlines get negative and they sell. And if they just hold through thick and thin, they do a lot better. But they let those emotions get the better of them. And if you pay too much for a great company, that's not going to really hurt you too much. It's when you sell at an opportune time and lock in those losses, and then once people have done that, they'll wait for the market to go up a whole bunch before they get back in. So they leave a lot of money on the table. So if I can hold hands and help people from panicking when things get scary, that's where I can add the most value.
So what does an average day look like for you in your role? Like, what are the kinds of things that you do?
Well, that's one of the things I like about my job. There is no average day. There's always something different. I work with advisors and talk to them about their portfolio, talk to them about things that they should be excited about. Or if something's not working, they'll want to understand why it's not working, why we might be hanging on. I work with my team. We have a couple of internal meetings every week, talking about the stocks that we're covering, talking about the stocks that we should cover or consider covering. We have an internal meeting with our advisors once a week where we talk. We normally pick 3 or 4 topics and talk about specific companies or industries and our views on it and how they're evolving, whether we're saying we should buy more or be taking profits. I spend a lot of time thinking. I do presentations for people. It's what I love about it. I think of the market as a big jigsaw puzzle. I love trying to solve the puzzle. I'm never going to succeed, but trying to get better at it and do a better job of understanding portfolio strategy and where the world's headed than the average person, than our competitors, is what drives me and what gets me out of bed. I like owning pieces of businesses because I know they're going to grow over time.
Part of your job also is running a department, though, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
so what's sort of the mix between your thinking, your researching, your talking, but then you also have to be the manager of a department?
The people in my department are analysts. They're professionals. They're curious. They're driven to their clock. They think the same way as me. They're passionate. They want to figure out why one company is better than the other. So we spend our time talking about, why something's working, why something's not working, why we think it'll change in the future. It's a very flat, structure in the department. We're all on the same level. We're all trying to solve the same problems, and so because they're all self-starters, because they're curious and passionate. There's not a lot to manage most of the time.
You're also one of the faces of the company.
Yes.
So how much of your energy are you putting into doing things like this, interviews and presentations and so on? And what's the process that you go through to make sure that you're ready for that presentation at that time?
It depends on what the topic is. When I do one, as I did on artificial intelligence with you, I review the companies that are participating in that theme, and there's normally a few hours that go into that, so I understand my facts well before I do it. I do a presentation for clients once a year where we go around the province. We got a couple of thousand people out in the various, in aggregate in the various locations, and we think about a theme that it's normally stuff that's in the news. Lately it's been about inflation and the risk of recession, and talk about how we think about the risks in the world that they're reading about every day in the paper, and tell people, we think you should worry about this. We think you should not worry about the hype around this, and so on and so forth. So it's always evolving, and that's what I find makes my job really interesting.
So one of the interesting audiences for this series are for younger people who are starting to look at career options in front of them. Mm-hmm. When you left, secondary school, looking at going into, post-secondary education, what did you envision that you were going to do? What did you study?
Well, I consider myself lucky because relatively early in life, I knew I had an interest in finance. I knew I had an interest in the stock market, and that grew out of talk around the dinner table, really. My father was in the investment business. He was first an analyst and then a portfolio manager and then an owner of his own business. So there was a lot of shop talk. I was interested in it. I was curious. My father was a great teacher. So by the time I went to university, going to business school was something that just naturally flowed from that. Interestingly, I have a job where all I do is read and write, and I'm told that I'm one of the better writers in the firm. But for most of my schooling, elementary school in particular, I was in Learning Assistance Center for reading and writing. And a lot of that was driven by, if I read a novel or Shakespeare, I didn't really understand it. I had some learning challenges, and if you don't understand the material that you're taking in, you don't have anything to say. You don't develop writing skills. But by the time I got into business school, I had something to say. And that's when I realized I actually had a talent for writing and developed it. So and I think in this day and age with technology, everybody's got a different skill set, but there's probably a technology that can let you, work around your weaknesses. If you can't spell as I can't, you've got spell check, no problem.
So where'd you go to school?
I went to school on the west side to McGee in high school and UBC for commerce, and yeah.
And did you go to Odlum Brown right away, or what was your career path?
No, out of Odlum Brown, I went to
out of UBC, you mean?
Out of UBC, I went to a firm called McDermott St. Lawrence, which was a great company with a lot of great people. They were focused on the venture side of the business, which that would have been a great place to exploit a career. That's where my interests lie, and I spent a few years there. But I was more interested in conservative investing, which is how I ultimately ended up at Odlum Brown. But how did I end up at McDermott St. Lawrence? My father had told me he knew an advisor there who was originally in the computer industry and decided to change careers. He said he's extremely smart, doesn't work that hard, and makes a lot of money. Why don't you go see if you can figure out how he does it? I talked to that gentleman. He didn't have a role for me there, but he introduced me to the firm's CEO. I said if he'd give me a shot, I'd work for free as an analyst for 6 months. He gave me a shot and so actually paid me a little bit of money and took a chance on me. And that's where I started to develop my skill.
Wow. And from there you went to Odlum Brown.
Yeah.
Starting, first of all, in a more junior role, I'm sure.
Well, the job I landed when I moved to Odlum Brown was head of the research department, which was just me and one other guy. And the job was so over my head at the time when I look back. But I learned on the job. And I already knew, but it started small. I was just recommending individual stocks. The other gentleman in the department covered the resource area, and I covered consumer and industrial or forest, and those things. And I started a model portfolio that's done very well over the years in that first year. And I wanted to make sure that it was diversified across all the sectors in Canada, and we didn't even have we didn't have the capacity to cover everything. So I wanted to make sure that we found, the top 1 or 2 stocks, at least in every sector, and put them in that portfolio. And the initial portfolio had a few stocks in there that we didn't even cover at the time because we didn't have the breadth of talent to cover everything. But we grew the department over time, first slowly and then somewhat faster. But we grew from 2 people to 7 analysts today, and it's been an amazing ride.
And how long have you been there?
30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? What do you think has been sort of your key personality trait that you think has allowed you to thrive and grow in the role that you're in?
I think curiosity, flexibility with my team. I'm very demanding in terms of productivity and generating ideas and dealing and learning from mistakes. But we have a very flexible environment. Everybody works different hours. People are fairly free to take holidays when they want. But I have very driven people on my team, and I think surrounding yourself by people that are smarter than you helps you thrive yourself. And so my investment philosophy has evolved over time. Some of that's been self-driven, but a lot of it's been driven by the ideas and thoughts of the people around me. It's been a collective journey.
So if you were talking to a young person who goes, okay, I want to be you, what would you tell them to consider if they want to embark on a career such as yours?
Get the experience, that's the hardest thing. When you're young and you don't have experience, you're not very valuable. You need to be willing to get the job and not worry so much about the remuneration. Like, the remuneration will take care of itself in due course, and probably faster than you think if you hit your stride. Being an analyst or a strategist is not for everybody, though. Some people would see it as a very stressful job, particularly when the market crashes. For me, it's actually when I thrive, because I know it's when I can add the most value. I try to make sense of the craziness that's going on around us. It's not always the case. During the financial crisis, when the banking system was going down the toilet, that was scary. And the authorities really needed to get their act together and save the banking system, although some of the bankers didn't deserve to be bailed out. But it was what the world needed to be done at the time. But people that are successful in a career like mine are successful because they're curious and they're passionate. So if you have the passion, if you follow it, I think you can do wonderful things. But you need to find somebody to give you the shot to get the experience so you can start climbing that ladder wherever it is.
Well, it's been a great career so far, and you plan on keeping going on, I imagine.
I enjoy what I do, so I don't know why it stopped.
Fantastic. Thanks for giving us some insight into your day-to-day work and your career path in getting there.